Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron, Thorgi, whatever you want to call me, and it has been a while since we did a spoiler talk. In fact, it's been so long that we have actually gained a ton of new subscribers since the last time we did a spoiler talk. I think we gained like 10,000 new subscribers since the last time we did one of these. So there's a lot of people out there who probably don't even know that this is a thing that we do on the channel. But yes, every now and again, whenever a game gives us a story or an ending that is really worth delving into, we love to come in here and just do a freeform discussion about it. And I was already planning on doing one of these for Resident Evil Village because this was the follow-up to Resident Evil 7. And that was a game that had so many mysteries behind it, I turned into that Charlie Day conspiracy theory meme. I was looking at every single note in that game and I was coming up with so many theories about it. And as I was playing through this game, I kept having those same thoughts. I kept thinking, okay, how could this tie into this thing? I mean, there's an umbrella logo right there, so we know that this somehow ties into the previous games. I mean, if you guys watched that trailer analysis video that I did, you know I was getting crazy from the smallest details in that trailer. So yeah, all throughout this game, I kept trying to figure out how every single little bit of this could tie into something else, what the mystery behind all this could be. And then at the end of the game, they just come out here and tell you right to your face, oh, this is what everything means. So yeah, I really didn't have to get all conspiratorial on this one. They actually just gave us the answers. But hoo boy, were those some answers. Before we get into the actual spoiler, I will come in here and just give you my real quick thoughts on this game. I don't know if we're going to actually do a review for this. I've been meaning to make a post about this, to talk about this, get everybody's thoughts on this, and let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But over the last year, our reviews, they've been doing about the same. You know, people have basically been tuning in at about the same rate. However, when it comes to all of our video essays, those things have been exploding. Tons of people have been watching our video essays. So I'm thinking of kind of moving away from reviews, since pretty much everyone else on the internet does video game reviews, and moving more into the stuff that makes our channel unique. Let us know what you guys thought, because if we are going to do reviews, Resident Evil 8 is kind of a game that we have to do a review on. So yeah, just let me know what you guys think of that down below. Maybe rather than doing full feature-length reviews, we only stick to quick reviews from now on. But yeah, that's just something for you guys to think about. Tell me what you think in the comments down below or on Twitter at Thorgi's Arcade. But just my real quick thoughts on this game as a whole. I loved it. I think this game is amazing. This game is easily in my top 5 favorite Resident Evil games. I don't know where it's going to be in there because Resident Evil 4 is definitely my favorite Resident Evil game. Resident Evil 4 is probably my second favorite video game of all time. But then after Resident Evil 4, the Resident Evil remake, the Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 7, and now Resident Evil Village, they're all kind of in a 4-way tie for numbers 2 through 5, depending on what day of the week it is. I think those games are going to just kind of shift around. It's really too early for me to tell where Resident Evil Village is going to permanently stick on that list, but it's definitely in that top 5. I love the hell out of this thing, which, when the game began, I wasn't really feeling it. I think that opening sequence where you're just having to battle off the Lycans, and then Lady D's castle, Lady Dimitrescu, which I never learned how to properly pronounce that name. But yeah, Lady D's castle. I thought that section was kind of boring and really underwhelming. Like, I kept thinking, oh man, Lady D, she's gonna be an even bigger version of Mr. X and Nemesis that's just gonna be chasing you down this entire time. She chased me a little bit and it was super easy to avoid her. Like, she really did not live up to the hype, which in all fairness, the video game community as a whole created that hype, not Capcom. Capcom leaned into that hype after the internet created it. But yeah, a lot of people went into this game with the impression that she was going to be the main villain. She was going to be chasing you throughout the entire game. And this is when we start getting into the spoiler stuff in here. Wow, Capcom really had no idea she was going to explode like she did. I've seen people online, I've kind of hinted at this, in which I was like, yeah, she doesn't really play as much of a role in here as some people might think. And I've seen a lot of people comparing her to Voss in Far Cry 3, in which people are like, yeah, she's this big popular character, but then they get rid of her. Voss was there for like 80 to 90% of Far Cry 3. He was basically the main villain of that thing. They just at the very end were like, let's throw somebody else in there. Lady D is in this thing for like 20% of the game. Like, that's it. She is the first boss that you fight. She is in and out of that thing. And it just cracked me up when I saw how little of this game she actually made up, because I keep thinking about the people at Capcom who had no idea that she was going to explode like she did. Like, Capcom ended up making gigantic standees of her and sending them out to stores for everybody to put up in their windows. And I just keep thinking that was so not in their advertising budget when they initially wrote this stuff up. Like, they had to go to their boss and go to them with a report that goes, we've been looking around the internet, and it appears that the internet searches for giant vampire lady have gone up 9,000%, so maybe we should relocate some of these funds towards, promoting giant vampire lady. Which I'll just go ahead and say this in case anyone at Capcom just happens to be listening. You are going to sell a ton of copies of Resident Evil 8 because people are obsessed with the sexy monster lady. You do know that you have an entire franchise full of sexy monster ladies, right? The Darkstalkers fanbase is still waiting on something. And if this has not proved to you there is that audience out there, I don't know what will. Hell, you know what? Put out Darkstalkers 4, put Lady D in there as a DLC character. You know that would sell copies of that game. Guys, at this point, I'm just really desperate for Darkstalkers 4, and I'm just trying to use whatever I can to get that thing made. But anywho, as I said, when the game began, I wasn't really feeling it. I kind of had to remind myself of how awkward some of the combat is in the first-person Resident Evil games. And as I said, I thought that Lady D's castle was kind of boring. It was just kind of basic. But after that, man, did this game pick up. This game, the level design is so good, it rewards you for going back to areas you had been to before. The way that parts of the map just slowly keep opening up. It really is kind of like the very first Resident Evil game, or now I think about it, sort of in a way Resident Evil 7 as well, where they take this location, this mansion, and they reward you for going back and finding things that were there before, because you keep getting things that let you open up new doorways that you couldn't go to before, except that now, rather than being one building, it's an entire village, and I kind of think it was brilliant how they did that. And as I said, Lady D's castle thought was kind of basic, but then the next level after that, the one with the puppet, that was basically just Capcom turning towards Konami going, we could make a better Silent Hill game than you anytime that we want, right? I mean, hell, Ethan already looks like the protagonist of Silent Hill 2. We gave him the hoodie. Konami, just let us make that next Silent Hill game. You've seen everyone asking for it. We could do it like that. Then the level after that with the giant fish guy, it was basically just one giant boss fight. However, it was kind of like a puzzle boss fight, and I really enjoy whenever Resident Evil games are willing to do that, where they have a boss that is half having to actually fight them, half having to run away from them and actually think about where you're going to stand when you actually fight them. I really enjoy that. And then we go into Heisenberg's level, and every single Resident Evil game, it always has to end in a lab. It always has to end in a lab. That's always how this goes. I think this might be the best lab setting of any Resident Evil game, because so many lab settings in Resident Evil games, it doesn't really fit the tone of the previous part of the game, which that's part of the reason why the lab level is there. It's because the lab level is there to come in here and say, oh, you thought it was monsters? No, it's actually crazy science stuff. So there's a reason why the lab levels in Resident Evil games always feel different from the rest of the game. However, this one actually fit with the rest of the game because this entire game, it's all based around classic monster tropes. There's 4 different bosses, and every single one of them, there's also a couple of mid-bosses, and there's also the big final boss, but you know what I mean. There's 4 members of this family. There are 4 different parts of Lady Maria's family, And every single one of them represents a classic monster trope. Lady D is a vampire. The puppet lady is a ghost. Then the fish guy is, creature from the Black Lagoon, the classic fish monster. And then Heisenberg is Dr. Frankenstein. And you're basically going through this lab, and yeah, it's got the weird, goofy Resident Evil stuff in there, like zombies with jetpacks on there. However, they're all Frankensteins. That's what they're all meant to be. And I love that the entire last full-blown level of this game is you essentially not storming Umbrella's secret base, you're storming Castle Frankenstein. I think that was great. That was a brilliant way to do the final lab level of a Resident Evil game. Also, before I forget to mention this, I mentioned how the puppet level, that entire thing was just basically Capcom doing Silent Hill. That was the scariest part of this entire game. It's the scariest part of almost any Resident Evil game. It's way up there when it comes to scariest Resident Evil moments. But what I really, really enjoyed about that entire level is that as I was playing through this game, I kept thinking, they are leaning way too much into Resident Evil 4. And I love Resident Evil 4, as I said, it's probably my second favorite video game of all time. I freaking love Resident Evil 4. And I think that a lot of the times in this game, they did the Resident Evil 4 comparisons well. Like, I really enjoyed the treasures and combining the treasures. I enjoyed the attaché case. I enjoyed so many of these things, but there were a lot of times where it felt like they were trying to copy Resident Evil 4 too much. Like, the way that Resident Evil 4 starts is with you having to fight off Ganados in the village, and you basically just have to survive until they're all mysteriously called away. Same thing happens here at the beginning where you're having to survive against all the Lycan, and you just have to survive until they're mysteriously called away. Yeah, so there's just a few too many things in here that's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we got in Resident Evil 4. But I think that the Ghost House is the best Resident Evil 4 reference in this entire game, because for anybody who doesn't know, Resident Evil 4 went through many different stages. And before we wound up with the village Ganados thing that we ended up getting, one of the early ideas for Resident Evil 4 was going to be that Leon is in this castle, and he ends up getting affected by some kind of a mist that causes him to hallucinate. So he keeps seeing ghosts, and he keeps seeing things in this building coming to life. And one of the early clips was there was going to be a section where little tiny dolls were going to come to life and keep attacking him. So now you have an entire level where Ethan is hallucinating and dolls are coming to life and attacking him. And I just looked at that and went, oh my God, this is brilliant. This is a great thing that you shoved in here. This is one of those Easter eggs that it's not just you stopping the whole thing and going, yeah, it's like that thing in that other game. This is you going, we're gonna make a deep cut that is just here for the big Resident Evil nuts. You took the cut content from Resident Evil 4 and shoved it into this game, and it fit perfectly. Also, speaking of the individual levels in here, I mentioned that, yeah, the combat in first-person Resident Evil games, it's a little bit clunky at times, and I had to readjust myself to it, but I did slowly start to get used to it. And I'll admit, when we got to the first part of Heisenberg's level, before you actually get to the factory and he has you go through the gauntlet of Lycans, that entire thing is just you having to fight off wave after wave after wave of werewolves, and I came fully all the way around on the combat. That was the moment in which I had slowly been warming up to the combat in here, and when it got to that moment, I was like, no, they give you everything that you need to make this combat good. The crafting and the way that you can just constantly keep running out of ammo, but then you gotta open up your menu and then go to the crafting to craft stuff on the fly, and you gotta start doing it in the math in your head of, oh man, am I gonna have enough stuff to craft all the ammo that I need for this moment in which I'm being overrun with all these monsters? It creates so much tension in those moments. When I was done with that whole gauntlet, I had used up everything, and I mean everything. So yeah, Resident Evil, it's a franchise in which you're supposed to constantly be counting bullets and always be afraid that you're about to run out of ammo. I never had to run away from monsters. I was always able to take out every monster that I ended up meeting. However, it was close. It was so close there towards the end. There were so many moments in the, I'd say, final third of this game in which after every single encounter, I just opened up my attaché case and went, oh my god, I used up everything. There is nothing left. If there's another monster coming, I am just screwed at this moment. So yeah, when it comes to the way that they balanced the survival horror aspect of this, in which you had to actually think about all the stuff that you were collecting, when you had to stop and think about your inventory, I think that they balanced that perfectly. And we got introduced to the Duke in this game, which I'll talk a little bit more about the Duke in just a second. But when we all played Resident Evil 4 and we met the merchant and he was giving us these guns, but he wasn't giving us ammo, I don't know about you guys, but I always looked at that and I was like, why on earth can't I just buy ammo from you? I know you have ammo. I need to just buy it directly from you. Why can't I do that? And then when we met the Duke, he was selling ammo and he was also selling health packs. And when I saw that, I went, oh, thank God. Thank goodness we finally have a merchant who is selling us ammo and health packs. Wait a second. That means that at some point in time, I'm probably going to have to buy health packs and ammo from you because the game will probably not provide me with enough to create on my own. Oh crap. And yeah, sure enough, there came points in this game in which I was so thankful to see the Duke because I could not create any more health packs for myself and I had to buy some off of him. So I just kind of love that this game gave us the thing that we wanted to see the merchant in Resident Evil 4 give us, and as soon as they gave it to me, I instantly dreaded it because it made me realize, oh, this game's gonna be really tough, isn't it? But speaking of the Duke, man, I love the Duke. And what's so weird to me is that when the Duke first popped up, kind of like the rest of this game, I kept thinking to myself, okay, yeah, it's a reference to Resident Evil 4, and that's nice, that's certainly nice, but yeah, Resident Evil 4 was better. Like, I looked at the Duke, and I just thought to myself, okay, you're fine, but you're no the merchant. No one will ever replace the merchant. We all love the merchant and those 3 or 4 lines that he kept saying to us over and over again. That guy was great and you will never be the new merchant. By the end of this game, I love the Duke more than the merchant. The Duke is amazing at the end of this thing. I love that the Duke and Ethan actually kind of established like a friendship. Like there towards the end, which is when we start getting into the really spoilery stuff here, everybody. But there towards the end, when the Duke picks Ethan up and he is carrying him to the final fight ground. And Ethan is like, I have to ask you a request. You have to take me to Miranda. And the Duke is just like, I thought you might ask me that, so I'm already on my way. It's like, wow, the Duke and Ethan kind of bonded over this. Like, Leon never cared about the merchant, and the merchant never cared about Leon. The merchant just cared about his coin, and Leon just cared about the guns. They had a solely business relationship. But despite the fact that at first it really feels like the Duke is some ominous figure who is just there to manipulate Ethan, like I kept thinking there was gonna be some kind of a twist, like the Duke was actually opposed to Miranda and all the other people running this village. So he was like, well, maybe if I use Ethan and send him in this direction, then I can get him to take them out, and then I won't have to worry about them anymore. No, there was never any reveal about that. You just kind of get that sense that the Duke just was like, listen, I do have to run a business here, so I do have to take your money, but I understand your plight and I'm going to help you however I can. And I just love that. The Duke is a solid guy. And I love that there's also a huge mystery behind the Duke. Like there was always this mystery behind the merchant. Nobody had any idea who or what the merchant was. And you don't know who or what the Duke is in this one. However, they actually address that at one point, and I think the way they address it is the best way you could possibly have addressed this. Like I said, Leon never cared about the merchant. He was always just like, I'm not gonna look this gift horse in the mouth. So if you're giving me weapons, I'm gonna take your weapons. So he never had any kind of exchange with him, but Ethan had plenty of exchanges with the Duke. So you know that Ethan was going to eventually have questions about the Duke, and there at the very end, Ethan finally asked him point blank, who or what even are you? And I love the Duke's response, because part of the appeal of the Duke is that, part of the appeal of the Duke and the merchant is that you don't know what they are. But anybody in their right mind would have to ask, what are you? You keep popping up all over the place. You have all these supplies. You're helping me for some reason. What What the heck are you guys? And I love that the Duke's response is just, even I can't answer that one. And that's the perfect answer. That's it. That is the perfect answer. Anybody in their right mind would ask the Duke, who are you? And the fact that the Duke doesn't even know himself, because the Duke is just that mysterious, is the perfect way of finally addressing the elephant in the room, finally bringing up that thing that anybody in their right mind would bring up, but you still leave it a mystery. In fact, now it's such a mystery that we know we're never going to get an answer to it, but we're okay with that, because at least we tried to get an answer to it. I think that they handled the Duke perfectly in this thing. And again, when he first popped up, I was like, all right, you're fine, but you're no merchant. And by the end of this thing, he's definitely in my top 10 favorite Resident Evil characters. He might even be in the top 5. All right, let's finally go ahead and talk about this story, because I think that, you know what, I don't even think, I know. Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Village, has easily the best story of any Resident Evil game. Because this is the most emotional Resident Evil story. This is the one that actually really delves into a lot of emotional torment that our character is going through. This is one that actually has really high stakes that aren't just generic stakes like we have to save the entire world. No, this guy is trying to save his daughter. This is personal stakes. And you see that struggle throughout this entire game. And you see Ethan pushing himself so much to try and save his daughter. And you feel for Ethan because of that. And that's an amazing thing, because in Resident Evil 7, Ethan wasn't meant to have a character. Ethan wasn't meant to be a character. Ethan was meant to be blank-faced guy that you, the audience, could easily fit yourself into. This is the very first-person Resident Evil game, so he was not meant to really have any kind of a character. He was meant to be just completely a blank slate, so you, the audience, could fit yourself right there into his shoes. But in this one, yeah, Ethan goes through some stuff. And not just physically, he goes through stuff on every single level. And by the end of this thing, I found myself genuinely caring for Ethan, and the twist and the reveal that they make about him just left me speechless. Because as I was playing through this game, and Ethan constantly keeps having stuff happen to him. He keeps getting his arm chopped off, and then he's got silly putty it back on with that weird green goop from the Baker estate. He gets his hand bitten off at one point. By the way, if you guys have not been on Twitter and seen the Ethan Winter memes going around, top tier stuff. Just the best. Just some of the best memes anyone could make about this game. Just take a quick moment, just type in Ethan Winters into a Twitter search real quick. You'll find some gold. But yeah, Ethan Winters, man, the physical stuff that he ends up going through, like, he gets stabbed right in the gut. He has so many things happen to him. And there came a moment in which I had to stop and go, okay, this has gotten ridiculous. Like, yeah, I know it's Resident Evil and these are characters who they punch boulders and stuff, but that's not Ethan Winters. The entire point of, like, Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil 4 is that he is Mr. Super Agent who can do all kinds of crazy stuff. The whole point of Chris in Resident Evil 5 is that he is Mr. Super Agent who he can punch a boulder because he's just that ripped. Yeah, they are superhuman people going up against these superhuman threats. The appeal of Ethan Winters is that he's the everyman. It's that he doesn't have any of those crazy superpowers. And when it comes to Ethan Winters' line deliveries, there were a lot of times where they tried to give Ethan the really cool one-liners, and I was like, no, that's not your thing, guy. That's not, Ethan, you're not the guy who gets the movie poster quote, okay? You're not that guy. It's okay. That's not for everyone. I mean, we got Leon over there. We don't need every Resident Evil character to have the one-liners. That's totally fine. The times when Ethan Winters was at his best when it came to the line reads was when he just had that tone of, I am so fed up with this shit. When he just had that tone of, I am tired. I am done. Like that moment which he's going through Heisenberg's castle, his factory, I should say. When he's going through Heisenberg's factory, and there's a moment in which he gets up to a different floor and he just goes, there's more? I went, that's it. That's Ethan Winters. That's what we like about Ethan Winters. He's the guy who looks at the crazy stuff you have to do to survive a Resident Evil game and just goes, this is some bullshit, and I don't want to do this anymore. but I gotta go and save my daughter, so I'm gonna do it. But yeah, Ethan kept getting his ass kicked, and he kept getting parts of himself chopped off, and he kept having so many horrible things happen to him, and falling like 30, 40, 50 feet, and then getting back up and walking again, that I kept thinking to myself, there has to be some kind of a reveal that Ethan Winters is superhuman. That he is some kind of an umbrella experiment, that there is something that happened to him, and at the end, they do reveal that. The thing that I thought they were going to reveal, they do end up revealing that. However, the reveal is even better than anything I could have thought. Because I kept thinking that, okay, maybe he's something that Mia ended up creating to become her husband or something, some other weird experiment from whatever group it is that Mia works for. Who knows? Which I don't think we ever found out what group it is that Mia works for. There's a moment in which there is a note that references a group came to Mother, oh God, I forgot her name all of a sudden. But a group came to the big villain of the entire game and talked to them about reviving her daughter using the Metamucites. So we know that it is some kind of a mysterious group, but yeah, we never actually find out what it is, I don't believe. But yeah, I kept thinking, it's like, okay, so maybe he's another experiment, maybe he's something else like that. But the reveal is, no, Ethan was a normal, regular human. And that normal, regular human was killed in the opening level of Resident Evil 7. In the opening of Resident Evil 7, after you fight off the possessed Mia, and then Jack Baker comes in there, and he punches you, he says, welcome to the family, punches you in the face, and then he steps on your chest, that you just internally bleeded out. You're not Chris Redfield who can take a hit like that. No. You are Ethan Winters. Also, you just lost your arm. You've been losing blood this entire time. You had your hand chopped off not that long ago. So you've already been losing blood from that. Then you had to go and climb and fight your wife. And then Jack Baker comes in there and compresses your chest with his size 12 Timberlands. Yeah, you're not, a normal guy's not gonna survive that. You're not the action hero. And Ethan Winters didn't survive that. So they fed him to the mold, but I guess Ethan's dedication to save his wife just caused his consciousness to survive in there. The mold formed back into Ethan, and so for all these years, Ethan's just been living as a normal human. So, like many of the other monsters in here that can take shots to the head, they can get parts of their body blown off and still keep coming at you, Ethan Winters could survive all this crazy stuff, but he could keep coming. And at the end of this game, which again, this is it. If in case you really, really did not want any spoilers, I'm now going to talk about the very end of the game. At the very end of the game, when you see him after his fight with Mother Miranda, thank you, I just remembered it, with Mother Miranda, and you see Ethan looking at his hand and it's starting to turn black and starting to fade away, you realize, yeah, every single one of these monsters, they always had to take a certain number of hits before they just crumbled away to dust. And Ethan Winters has finally had the crap kicked out of him too much. He's taken too many hits, and now he's crumbling away to dust. He is dying for the exact same reasons why all the other bosses in this game die. And that's a crazy thing to me, that we had a Resident Evil game where you play as the infected, where you play as the zombie. And I know some people are going to say, well, what about Jake, whatever his name was, Wesker's kid in Resident Evil 6, there's a big difference between the super soldier experiment, between the super soldier bioweapon, the one who totally looks normal, is totally fine, and he just has superhuman abilities, and the molded. Between, like, because that's the thing, Ethan Winters is basically just a jobber monster. He was not one of the big crazy monsters that has all these superpowers. No, he doesn't have any superpowers. He's got the powers of a man. He can just take a lot of hits like a regular zombie. Ethan Winters, if his consciousness had not been able to take over the mold because he just had that much fight and dedication in him, some other guy would have come to the Baker estate looking for answers and would have just had to put a shotgun blast up to Ethan's head, who would have just been a big old molded at that point. Heck, it probably would have been Jack Baker's brother from that DLC mission if Ethan had not had the dedication that he had then Robo Baker would have come out of the swamp and just punched his head off. That would have been the end of the guy who became our protagonist for 2 games in a row. Actually, hold up, oh my goodness, I just realized something right now. Oh man, okay, sorry. Actual revelation happening right now. There is actually a precedence in that DLC mission for what happens to Ethan. It just hit me. Okay, for anybody who did not play that DLC mission where you're Jack's brother, the big monster that you're fighting that time, it's essentially just Swamp Thing, but there comes a moment in which you rip his face off and you reveal, oh my goodness, it's actually Jack Baker. He's still alive in some way, even though Ethan gave him the antidote and turned him into a big pile of ash. Somehow, he's still alive, and now he's this new monster, and I heard a lot of people out there get really upset with that because they said that means that the antidote doesn't actually work. It means that what Ethan did didn't actually mean anything. But if you read all the notes that you can find in that DLC mission, there is a note in there that says that they have found a particular type of molded that is roaming around the swamp, that it eats up dead things and then it absorbs their memories. That's what it does, so that's why you fought Jack Baker again. Jack Baker did indeed die when Ethan gave him that antidote. What you are fighting as Jack's brother is this new version of the molded that essentially just absorbed his memories after he died. That's exactly what Ethan is. Ethan died, they fed him to the molded, that molded essentially kind of just got his memories. Wow, that is actually crazy how one note in the DLC mission explains all of this. And speaking of the everyman side of Ethan Winters, I love that when you play as Ethan Winters, it really feels like a survival horror game. But then there comes that moment right after you get tossed down to the bottom of the factory by Heisenberg, and you're like, oh god, I gotta climb my way all the way back up there. And then you run into Chris, and Chris explains, yeah, okay, Mia, that wasn't Mia. It was Mother Miranda. She has shape-shifting powers. She disguised herself as Mia because she was trying to get to Rose, because Rose has all these crazy abilities. We don't even know why, because we aren't going to tell you about who or what you are. But Chris comes in there, tells him the reason why they attacked Mia, why they're there in this village, and then Chris decides to help him out. And I love that Ethan, it's been very much like the everyman guy in the Resident Evil game, in which he's going around just finding whatever weapons he can, scrounging together whatever resources he can, having to craft on the fly so that way he can have just enough to keep on fighting. And then Chris shows up and goes, alright, well here's this BattleBot thing with chainsaws and a cannon that I built for you. Go out there and knock him dead. And I like that it kind of felt like Chris Redfield coming up to the survival horror Resident Evil guy and going, yeah. Let me show you how we did things in my day in Resident Evil. Here's what things were like in Resident Evil 5 and 6, okay? Listen, you're not gonna take these guys out with your survival horror Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil classic callback stuff. No, you're not gonna take guys out with that. You need the stupid Resident Evil, which let me go ahead and say, when I say the stupid Resident Evil, I don't mean that in a bad way, in any way, shape, or form. It took me a while to realize that, because I remember when I was younger and Resident Evil 4 came out and everybody kept going, oh, Resident Evil 4 is dumb. Resident Evil 4 is so dumb. And I always got mad when people said that. I always got so mad when people said Resident Evil 4 is dumb, because I was like, this game is not dumb. This game is brilliant. This game has great characters. This game has great fun dialogue in there. The combat is incredible. The monsters are great. It took me so long to realize dumb does not mean bad. In fact, many times, dumb is great. Dumb is incredibly fun. And yeah, now that I'm older and wiser and I realize that there is such a thing as fun dumb, I look back at Resident Evil 4 and I'm like, oh yeah, that game is dumb, but in the best ways possible. And that's one of the brilliant things about Resident Evil. Resident Evil has always known how to do good dumb. Resident Evil has always known how to do dumb right. And in that moment in which Chris shows up and he's like, all right, here's this giant mech that I built for you to fight Heisenberg in. I went, this is literally somebody from the dumb era of Resident Evil coming in here and going, you're gonna need some dumb Resident Evil to survive this. That just cracked me up so much. I was like, this is a brilliant melding of two different worlds. This isn't the Resident Evil universe is completely different now and feels like a completely different thing, so we have to be ashamed of all that dumb stuff from before, and we have to hide the way that Chris used to be. No! They fully admit that everything that Chris has done in his life still happened. All that crazy stuff from 5, all that crazy stuff from 6, it still happened. There's even a moment in which Heisenberg refers to Chris as that boulder-punching asshole. I was like, this game gets it. This game gets that all that crazy stuff. Listen, yeah, we can now have the more serious Resident Evils. We can have the more grounded Resident Evils. We can have the Resident Evils that don't focus on super soldiers, that focus more on regular guys. But that doesn't mean that we have to ignore all that crazy stuff that happened. And I love it. That entire sequence in there, it was like that perfect merging of two worlds. And then after that, when Ethan, quote unquote, dies, and then we swap over to Chris, and Chris goes into this village that was giving Ethan so much trouble, and Chris is taking out the Lycan with like just a handful of shots from his super overpowered weapons, and he's got ammo up the wazoo. Like, you open up his attaché case and it's nothing but ammo. And then he starts running around the village and there's just more ammo everywhere to pick up. I love that entire sequence because, again, I looked at that and I was like, this entire time we've been playing the survival horror Resident Evil game. This is Chris coming in here with the dumb action movie Resident Evil stuff. And it's great. Again, it is a merging of two worlds. It is showing the difference between Ethan and Chris. And I love that because it makes you feel for Ethan so much more when you see what the action hero Resident Evil guy is like. It makes you feel so much more for how difficult this has been for Ethan to pull all this stuff off when you look at how Chris fights and you realize, yeah, Chris, the action hero guy, could have taken care of this in 5 minutes. In a weird way, it's kind of the opposite of Ashley from Resident Evil 4. I know that so many people argue that Ashley is a pain and they hate Ashley. I really like Ashley. I will go ahead and say that right now. That's probably my most controversial Resident Evil opinion, but I actually really like Ashley. And one of the reasons I really like Ashley is a lot of people complain that, oh, she can't fight back and she doesn't really do anything and you just have to protect her. And that's kind of the reason that I like Ashley, because, yeah, Leon's been off for years getting all this special training to become this super soldier. So then when you go up and you meet someone who isn't a super soldier, it makes you realize, yeah, that's how much of a badass Leon is, because any normal individual in the Resident Evil world would not be able to stand up to this stuff. They wouldn't be able to fight back against this stuff. It's just that crazy. It's just that powerful, which makes you realize what a badass Leon is by comparison. This is like the exact opposite of that. Because throughout this entire thing, we've been playing as the normal guy who has to work his ass off to be able to withstand these circumstances. And then that moment when you actually see what Chris is like in this game, you realize, oh wow, Ethan really is the everyman. Because compared to the action movie guy, oh, it's night and day. It's not even close. By the way, weird thing to bring up here all of a sudden, but speaking of night and day, can we just talk about how interesting it is that this might be the only Resident Evil game to be like 95% set during the day? I thought that was really cool. Like, it's a very different thing. We don't normally get that. I really enjoyed that because it was them coming in here and saying, it doesn't have to be set at night to be scary. We can make broad daylight scary. And I really enjoyed that. I thought that was an interesting challenge that they gave themselves. But okay, let's get into the very end of the game right now and talk about all the stuff that we got on Mother Miranda, which, by the way, I will admit, I forgot for a brief second what her name was. I did have to Google Mother Miranda, and when you type in Mother Miranda Resident Evil into a Google search, not the first thing that comes up, but like the 4th or 5th thing that comes up is Mother Miranda height. Man, Lady Dimitrescu has really just ruined you guys, hasn't it? That is just going to become the new thing for years now. There is someone at Capcom right now trying to figure out how in that totally unnecessary Resident Evil 4 remake they have coming up, how they can possibly shove in like a female Gigante. Okay, we need other giant ladies in here now. That's gonna be the trend that you start seeing. Remember when Slender came out and everybody made a Slender ripoff? Remember when Five Nights at Freddy's came out and everybody made a Five Nights at Freddy's ripoff? We're gonna see a bunch of giant lady monsters for a while. That's just gonna be a thing. But yeah, at the very end of this, when you have now taken out all the other villains, and then Mother Miranda comes in, I was a little bit nervous because as I said, Lady Dimitrescu was not the boss of this game because she was taken out so early, but Heisenberg was there for a while. You certainly got some hints of Heisenberg for a while, and his level certainly went on forever. So now you've taken out everybody, and now all that's left is Mother Miranda, but you've gotten almost nothing on Mother Miranda. You know that she's the one who has been pulling the strings. She's the one behind them all. But it's not like she's been there taunting you this entire time. It's not like you've been spying on her conversations this entire time. You get very little bits and pieces of Mother Miranda. And I was kind of worried that because of that, she wasn't really going to have enough personality. She wasn't going to have enough impact to be worth being the final boss. I think this is one of the best final bosses in a Resident Evil game. Mechanically speaking, there's so many great layers to it. There's so many great little bits and pieces in there of like, she transforms into this, so now you gotta do that. And now she's taking all the light away, and now she's summoning out a spirit bomb, and you have to stop her. There's so many things that you have to keep an eye on in there. I thought that mechanically that fight was brilliant, but also, I think that her entire story of she's trying to revive her daughter. As you read these notes and as you find out why she's doing all this, she's been doing this entire thing to get her daughter back. And what has Ethan been trying to do this entire time? He's been trying to get his daughter back. I think that's actually kind of like a great divide between Miranda and Ethan. I think that her motivations make her the perfect final boss for Ethan to go up against, because she's kind of a dark shadow of him. Ethan was willing to do all this stuff to save his daughter, but Mother Miranda was also willing to do all this stuff to save her daughter. But the thing that Mother Miranda was willing to do was kill innocent human beings by experimenting on them. So that way she can ruin their lives to learn more about them. So that way she can possibly bring her daughter back through experimentations. Whereas what Ethan was willing to do was have his arm chopped off, fight off waves of werewolves. Yeah, two different types of dedications. Clearly one good, one bad. And as you read through all the notes during Chris's time in the game, you learn something about Mother Miranda. And it's one of those things that a lot of times I hate when games do this simply because games don't do it well. A lot of times whenever a game, or not even a game, but just any type of story in general, comes in here and goes, well, that was the big threat for a long time, and now we have this new character, so we're going to make them the predecessor to that original bad guy. We're going to make them the one who created the original bad guy. And I am always very hot and cold on that. Because sometimes it feels unnecessary, sometimes it feels like padding, sometimes it feels like they're just getting desperate to go, oh, we have to reference that original thing, we have to kind of keep that around in some way, shape, or form, and I mean, what's the way to make something bigger than the last thing? Make it the thing that was already bigger than the last thing. And a lot of times it just kind of feels like grasping at straws. But then there are other times when it actually works. There are other times in which they nail it, and I feel like they nailed it here. Because there is a memo that you find in Mother Miranda's lab in which it's from Spencer. It's from the guy who founded Umbrella, and he said that he was her lab student, and she's the one who gave him the idea to search for immortality through experimentations, and I love it. I love it because two reasons. One, you know someone had to teach Spencer all the stuff he learned. Someone probably had to get him started down that mad scientist path. So it just kind of makes sense. And we have already established through Lady D that immortality is one of the powers that Mother Miranda can create. So if Spencer was that old, it would kind of imply that the only person who could still be around, who could have been his teacher, was someone who has access to immortality. And throughout this entire game, we've been seeing the Umbrella logo in this town. We've been seeing the Umbrella logo at these sacred sites, but these sacred sites look so old. And I kept looking at that going, okay, how does Umbrella tie into this? Because this stuff is so old. How long ago was Umbrella here that they were able to create all this stuff? So the explanation that Umbrella did not create these old things were already here, and because they were already here, they're the things that inspired Umbrella. That just makes sense. Like, it's not something that they came in here in the 11th hour and just decide, oh, we can kind of shove some kind of an explanation in here. No. They were setting up the entire time. It was in the background the entire time. And it's in that moment in which you read that and you realize that's where he got the idea for Umbrella from, that all of a sudden it just clicks with you. It all just comes back around. So yeah, I thought the way that they just very subtly set all that stuff up, great, brilliant, loved it all. And that's not the only thing that they end up tying Miranda to. They also, as I mentioned earlier, there is that moment in which there is a note in which it says that some organization came to her and said that, oh, we've heard what you've been doing and maybe we can help you out to bring your daughter back. And that became Evelyn from Resident Evil 7. That was the big villain of Resident Evil 7. It was a failed attempt to bring back Ava, Miranda's daughter. So I thought that was a pretty good way to tie her into that one and to tie all that back to the original Umbrella. But what made the Evelyn revelation even better was that as I thought about, why is Miranda doing all this? To get her daughter back. She needs to get her daughter back. That is her number one goal. What was Evelyn's number one goal in Resident Evil 7? What was the number one thing that she was after? A family. She wanted to create parents and brothers and sisters. That was the number one thing she was trying to do. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they came in here when they created Evelyn and they already had this mapped out in their head. I'm saying that they created this character of Miranda and then they tried to figure out how on earth they could tie all that back together. And the way they tied it all back together just works. It just fell into place so well. It falls into place so well here, I don't even know if they understand how well it works. Like, I feel like if I went up to the people who made this game and I mentioned, oh yeah, that was so brilliant, how Miranda was doing all this to get her daughter, and then the thing that she ended up creating to be her daughter with that organization, all it wanted was parents. That just balances itself out. I feel like if I went up to the people at Capcom and said that, they would just get really quiet, their eyes would dart back and forth, and they would just go, yes, exactly as we intended. Yeah, I don't know if that was actually planned, but holy crap does it work well. Although speaking of all the things that are being tied together, you can look at what Miranda has done here in this strange European village, how she has been going around all this time with parasites, creating monsters, and you can say, yeah, so that's literally just what they're doing in Resident Evil 4. And earlier in this video, I said that I think that upcoming Resident Evil 4 remake is pointless, and I still do kind of think it's pointless because, as I said, I think Resident Evil 4 is a freaking masterpiece. However, I do have to say, if they don't want to remake Resident Evil 4, but more of reimagine Resident Evil 4, I can let that go. Just coming in here and remaking it, I look at that and just go, there's no point. It's still like such a perfect game. But reimagining it so that way it can now fit more perfectly with inside this new continuity that they have created, all revolving around Miranda, I could understand that. I'm still kind of hesitant about, however, if they decide to make it in a way so that now it focuses more on how Miranda is tied to all this stuff, I could understand that and I could view that more easily as its own thing. I could let that go. So if that's what they want to do, all right, I'm listening. Like, I'm not saying come in here and now make Miranda the big villain of Resident Evil 4, but put in there some extra cutscenes or some extra notes that shows Salazar talking to Miranda or making communication with someone who introduced him to the Las Plagas, because they kind of already did that in the Resident Evil 3 remake. In the Resident Evil 3 remake, there is one note that you find in which it says that Nemesis was now created by a parasite that they found in Europe, and everyone, when they found that note, they all thought to themselves, you changed his origin around so that way he can now fit inside of Resident Evil 4. So now Nemesis is in some way tied to Resident Evil 4, and then as you're going around in this lab, you realize, oh no, they didn't change that so that he now ties into Resident Evil 4. They changed that so now he ties into Miranda. So now it was Miranda all along. You can all put in your Scarlet Witch joke there. So now that I think about it like that, I now realize why Capcom has the crazy idea to remake Resident Evil 4. They want to come in here, and they want to put a whole lot of little details in there that makes it apparent, where did the Lost Plagas come from? Well, it came from this person, Miranda. It came from this person who came to our village. They were wearing the crow's mask. They were wearing the Plague Doctor mask like we saw in those ending credits. They experimented on our people. Salazar is working with them. Maybe even tying like Jack Krauser is secretly like the 5th member of her family, and that's where he got all the parasites from. Or maybe he's not a member of her family, but like he went to her to get the special training after he found out about all this. Something in order to tie all this a lot more closely together. I can understand it now. I can understand. I'm still nervous, but I understand why they're doing it. Also, speaking of adding things in here, I don't know if this game is going to get DLC. I'm almost positive it is, but if it does get DLC, I would really like if it got some DLC featuring Leon and Ada, for no other reason than the fact that Leon and Ada have been in Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 6. It feels very odd to have an even-numbered Resident Evil game that they're not in. Like, as much as I love this game, I am a big Resident Evil nerd, and I am kind of looking at it like, oh, you broke the pattern. We had a pattern going, but that is a very superficial reason for why I feel like they need to kind of shove Ada and Leon into this. So you defeat Miranda, Ethan starts falling apart, he hands Rose back to Chris, and trusts Chris to go on out there and take Rose back to Mia and get them to safety, and then Ethan goes out, and with his last breath, he is able to blow up the giant Metamucite. He blows up the entire thing, destroys the entire village, and man, again, Ethan winters for a guy who in Resident Evil 7 was such a nothing, had no personality, he was only there just for you, the audience, to put yourself in their shoes. He became such a great character, and I cared so much about him at the end of this. I just wish they had shown us his face, because that entire sequence there at the end, in which Chris is trying to like pull him out of there, but they have to have very weird, awkward camera angles so that way we don't see Ethan's face. It really did kill a lot of the tension in that moment for me. Like, because they had to have such weird camera angles to avoid his face, it just made me look at it and go, this is such an oddly shot scene, and you could have had so much more emotion in here, especially because, you know, the face is the path to emotions. You know, the way that you display emotions is with your face. I don't know how more clearly to say that. And Ethan is giving such an emotional delivery there as he is saying goodbye to Rose. I would have loved it if, you know, if they want to keep even like part of his face hidden, have like those weird black tentacles coming over the bridge, and then you cut to seeing like the bottom half of Ethan's face. Like the top half is being covered by one of the big black vines, but you can still say like you can still see like his mouth saying goodbye to Rosemary. Something like that. In fact, there was even a perfect moment in there to show off Ethan's face. That moment in which Mother Miranda is holding up Rose, and then she goes, "What? No, it's not working. My powers are leaving me." And then you hear Ethan come in behind her, and she turns around. That would have been the perfect moment to finally show us Ethan's face. Yeah, they decided not to do it. But at the end of all this, there's a lot of stuff that gets set up, and this is going to be a very odd thing for me to say. I have been praising the heck out of this game, and I praise the heck out of Resident Evil 7. And Resident Evil always goes in trilogies. The first 3 games was the, at least as far as like the numbered games go, because I know there's Resident Evil 0, and there's also Resident Evil Code Veronica, but those ones are set outside of the main games. When I'm talking about the trilogies, I'm talking about Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3. That was the Umbrella trilogy. Then Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6. That was the Parasite trilogy. And now we have had, for lack of a better term, the Mold, the Evelyn, the Ethan Winters, the Winters family trilogy, I guess you could say. And every single trilogy also has a different gameplay style, like the first 3 were tank controls, then the second trilogy was the over-the-shoulder, now this trilogy, it's all first person. So I do know that we are definitely getting one more game, and that will definitely be the one that ends up wrapping up this trilogy. And as much as I love 7, as much as I loved 8, I am kind of excited for the last one to end this. Because I mentioned before that Resident Evil knows how to do dumb right. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes Resident Evil can be bad dumb. Like Resident Evil 6, I think, was bad dumb. I know some people really enjoy Resident Evil 6. I did not. I had way too many problems with it, and I just felt like it was way too over the top. I felt like that was a lot of its problems in here. Like, I was actually trying to stop and think to myself, when we got to that fight with Heisenberg and when you're fighting him in the battle bot, I was like, is this the dumbest thing that Resident Evil has ever done? It's definitely dumber than Robo Salazar in 4. It might be dumber than the boulder punching in 5, but no, it's not dumber than you are taking a tunnel that is a slip and slide that shoots you through the entire planet to the other side of the world, and you have to fight a mutant shark while you're in the air. No. That was too much. That was kind of too much. And where this game ends, I looked at it and went, I think we might be about to get into too dumb territory again. I think that Resident Evil 9 might be about to get too stupid again. So I am kind of glad for that to be the last one, because how this game ends is that Chris is with Blue Umbrella, and he's now left the BSAA, and a lot of this wasn't explained in 7, and I kept theorizing like crazy. Okay, what the hell is going on with Chris? What is happening with Chris? And why is he with Umbrella again? What happened there? But apparently, all that stuff has been explained. It just wasn't explained in the games. Apparently, it's been explained in the CGI movies and in the books, which I haven't, as much as a Resident Evil fan as I am, I have steered clear of all that stuff. But apparently it's all explained in there, and apparently there's nothing shady about it. Apparently it's just the United States government realized that bioweapons were now a thing, and the entire world knew about, so they needed some kind of an organization that could fight back against these, and they knew that Umbrella still had a bunch of weapons laying around that were designed to fight bioweapons, so the United States government just got a hold of Umbrella, ended up turning into Blue Umbrella. Chris started working with Blue Umbrella on loan from the BSAA, but as he worked with Blue Umbrella, he started looking back at the BSAA, and the BSAA started getting more and more corrupt, and he started to go, oh, I don't know about the BSAA anymore. And now in this game, you find out that the BSAA is now using bioweapons to fight bioweapons, and Chris is not a fan of that. So this thing ends with, we're going to BSAA headquarters. And then at the end of this, you cut to sometime in the future, and Rose, she's not a full-grown adult. She's like 14, 15, something like that. And she is now working for Chris. She is now working for his organization, and she's got all kinds of crazy powers now, and she is their secret weapon, and she now has to go off there and fight these BSAA monsters, which a lot of people are looking at this like, oh my goodness, are we going to now cut like 15 years into the future? We do know that she has got a lot of the same DNA in her that Evelyn has, and Evelyn, in the previous game, it was established that she aged incredibly quickly, and there is a moment in which you see how big Rose was when she was born, and she is huge for a baby, which that was my first thought when I saw Rose in this game. When they hand you Rose, I was looking at her like, this baby is gigantic. Do the people at Capcom not know the size of a normal baby? This thing is huge. But then at the end, when you realize, oh, because of Ethan, yeah, she's kind of got the same makeup as Evelyn, just she's like the perfected form of it. So that could still mean that she is aging incredibly quickly. So this might not be like 15 years in the future. This could only be like 4. This could be like 5 years in the future. In other words, when the next Resident Evil game would end up coming out. So yeah, I don't think that we are cutting to like 2035 for the next Resident Evil game. It probably is going to still stick with the current timeline. We're not going to jump into the future on that. But we are now going to go from everyman Ethan Winters. We're now going to go from survival horror where you have to count all of your ammo. And the way this game ends, it really kind of feels Like we are now going to go back to, okay, you're in charge of someone with superpowers and you're fighting super soldier zombies with guns. And I'm like, oh, it really kind of sounds to me like you just came in here and went, all right, Resident Evil 6 all over again. I'm like, I don't know. I don't want that. I really don't want that. Which, that's the thing about the Resident Evil trilogies. The final part is always where they kind of blow it. Like, most people agree that Resident Evil 3 is the worst of the original trilogy. Most people still like Resident Evil 3. I want to make that clear. Most people still like Resident Evil 3, but they do agree, yeah, it's not as good as Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 1. And then Resident Evil 6 is certainly the black sheep of the Resident Evil family. As I said, I know that game has its fans. I know it has people who enjoy it. But look at Metacritic, you'll see it's definitely the lowest of that trilogy. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at this like, oh man, you guys were really able to restrain yourself from all the too stupid Resident Evil stuff for 2 whole games. And it feels like now you're just like, I can't contain it any longer. I have to get it out of my system. So yeah, as much as I love this game, the way that it ends, I will admit, has me kind of nervous for the next game. But that is going to be the end of this trilogy. And yeah, if there's any time to go completely over the top, I guess it is the end of the trilogy. So there you go. I'm not too worried about it, but it does give me something to be nervous about. But there you go. I think those are all the things that I really wanted to get to in this spoiler talk. Holy cow, I really went for a while there. There are certainly other things that I could go into more detail about, but those are all the big ones. Those are all the main things that I wanted to hit. Let me know your thoughts on this game down in the comments below. And also, let me know, would you guys like to see us still continue to do the full feature-length reviews of games, even though that means that it would be longer in between each of our big video essays that you guys seem to enjoy far more? Or would you guys like to see us still do reviews, but only do quick reviews? You know, the little reviews that I don't have a script for, and I just come in here real quick and just give you my thoughts off the top of my head. Let me know all that stuff and more in the comments down below. You can also reach me on Twitter at Thorgi's Arcade. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and come back next time, everyone. Bye.